Hello, everyone. On behalf of the entire team here at Kalungi, let me be the first to welcome you to the Summer of SaaS. You're in for the best summer of growth you've ever experienced. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate the time and attention and your investment with us here today. So as you know, this webinar today is part of a 4-part series for SaaS founders. Every session will have great experts, exclusive templates, and actionable ideas you can take straight back to your startup to drive more growth today. Our next event is Thursday, June 27th, and we'll send you a reminder in your thank you email today. We welcome any feedback and questions about the content, so please don't be shy in sharing. And now today is about learning. So we haven't added any sales content about Kalungi to our presentation today, except this one brief, quick little slide. You should just know that Kalungi is an agency that provides growth as a service specifically for B2B software. And we're proud to serve leading SaaS companies like Social News Desk, StratusGrid, and many others. So please explore our website to learn more. Now, with that out of the way, I'm glad you're here because in the spirit of T2D3, we have a brand new template tool to unveil today. And we're going to demonstrate it and drop you a QR code for your own download. It's the marketing ROI forecast calculator. There'll also be a chance to win a 30-minute strategy session with Brian and get his best ideas on your company specifically, compliments of Kalungi. And lastly, we'll have a promo code to get $50 off the T2D3 CMO Masterclass. There's more about that later. So if you can't stay for the whole event, not to worry, just check your thank you email for links to all these items. And with that, let's turn to our topic today, which is mastering your go-to-market. And we want to introduce our expert speakers. So before you spend a single dollar on building a marketing team, you need to know how much is just right, where to point, and how quick to move, and how far to go. So here to tell us how are two experts in B2B software marketing. First, we have with us Brian Graf, CEO of Kalungi. He's an experienced software marketing leader who's also worked with a couple dozen companies as a fractional CMO and consultant. In his role here at Kalungi, he drives customer growth and matches our clients' marketing goals with strategy, execution, and leadership. Hello, Brian. And Stijn Hendrikse is here as well. He's co-founder of Kalungi and author of the T2D3 Playbook. He's contributed to over 20 startups as a C-level executive. This includes Chief Revenue Officer of Acumatica, CEO of Mighty Call, the initial global go-to-market leader for Atera, which is a SaaS unicorn, and also led B2B product marketing for Microsoft Office. So hello there, Stijn. Thank you both for being here today. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Brian Graf to answer the first question, which is, basically, as everyone knows, it's not easy to sell software to businesses. So why is that? And what implications does that have for forecasting? How can founders get this process right?
Yeah, thanks so much for being here, everyone. It's a really important question and it's a weighty one, right? There's getting it right gives you all the upside in the world, and getting it wrong can create a really challenging environment for your company to grow. So it's a really important one. First, before we get into the details there, let's just take a look at the kind of the state of marketing for B2B SaaS, right? It's changed quite a bit over the past few years. And by changed, I mean, it's just gotten much more complex, right? We've done a little bit of research and just pulled some sources together that kind of showcase this story, right? 96% of prospects do detailed online research. You all know, I'm sure, as well as I do, how much the consumer gets hammered with emails, with ads, with assets, right? It's a very crowded market, and it's vying for somebody's attention is becoming increasingly difficult. But even once you start that conversation with a prospect, it now requires about 8 touches before you can get them to the meeting. Even once you get them to the meeting, it takes 3 to 5 meetings to get them to close. And even in order for them to close, they're usually conferring with a handful of people on their side and having to sell internally before even making a purchase. This creates a much different world than what used to be, right, in terms of B2B SaaS selling. And so it really requires a very involved and thoughtful approach to go-to-market strategy. Next slide, Duff. There's also these 3 elusive elements of rapid growth. Again, it's one of those things where if you can get them right, then the world is your oyster. But if you can get them wrong, it can create a lot of challenges for you. the three that come to our mind and that we see a lot are speed, scale, and skill. Usually, if you're thinking about your go-to-market strategy, you want to start growing now, right? It's not something that's off in the distant future. You want to get that traction, and you need to see those results soon. But in order to facilitate those results, right, those results are going to change very drastically. What you're going for in 3 months will be very different than what you're going for in 6 months to a year, right? And so you need a strategy and a team that can support those changing goals. And then, of course, you need that team to be able to know what they're doing. They need to have done it before, and they need to be skilled. But it's a lot of the companies that we work with can't necessarily afford a team of 20 expert B2B SaaS marketers, right? And so how can you find the right mix to support your go-to-market goals and give you the highest quality results against your go-to-market strategy? So now that we've kind of gotten that out of the way, let's take a look at how to build the right go-to-market strategy. And we're going to go through a lot of different topics today, and I will go through some faster than others, but these first couple slides are really, really important, and we're sadly not going to be able to spend as much time on them as they deserve today, but they are critical. And if you're interested, Stijn has definitely written pretty prolifically on all of these subjects, and we've also recorded some podcasts. They're also on the T2D3 masterclass, so you can definitely check them out there. But let's start here, right? Before you can get to where you need to go, right? You need to know where that is. And we use Ansoff's matrix to help our clients figure that out, right? Usually we'll use this exercise to establish what the corporate goal is for the next year, for the next 5 years. And then we'll decide how we're going to go achieve that goal, right? We've kind of come up with, or this Ansoff's matrix has come up with this 2x2 chart that gives you a few different options, right? Are you going to achieve the goal by just pushing forward in the existing market that you have? Are you going to be entering a new market, which is in that marketing development stage? Or are you going to be updating your product to facilitate the current customers that you have, which is that product development stage? Of course, you can go into the diversification stage in the top right, but that's kind of what we like to call a pivot, and can be kind of it's a big lift, right? And usually not taken lightly when you're thinking through your go-to-market strategy. But going through an exercise like this really allows you to understand, again, what that goal is and what it's going to take to achieve that goal from a go-to-market strategy, and can be really useful in lining up resources and budget as you go forward. Any extra thoughts on this, Stijn?
I think when you think of the resources that you have that are scarce, right? If you're a small early stage company, both on the engineering side and the sales side, the funds you have to invest on either of those two sets of resources, you can use this tool also to determine, do you focus more on building something really unique, which leads you more to the bottom right side of this spectrum? Or do you focus more on positioning something that might not be that unique, but the way you go to market is very unique, the way you solve the customer's problem, the way you, of course, build up sales knowledge and sales expertise. So it's also a nice tool to kind of see, hey, is my company going to grow mostly through a go-to-market priority or focus, or through a real product focus? That's kind of the other side of this.
Yeah, that's a great point. And just to reiterate that, right, this is an exercise that isn't just marketing. It's not just marketing and sales, right? This is a full company exercise to make sure that everyone is aligned on the right approach, and that we're utilizing the company's assets in the best way, right? If you do have a really strong product, then you can focus on the market development and market penetration. Or if you know the market, right, but know that your product isn't quite there, then you can focus on product development. Let's go to the next slide. So this is the slide that we'll do the least justice to in this presentation, just because there's so much here. And all of these elements are critical to being able to execute a go-to-market strategy effectively. And I wanted to make sure I at least touched on them. But really, in order to develop and to execute a go-to-market strategy, you need to be able to basically tell the right story to the right audience and measure the right results so that you can optimize and double down, right? to tell the right story, you need really solid positioning and messaging. You need to standardize your brand. You need to have an opinion. You need to be able to take a stance in the market and become a thought leader. You need to have a website that makes you look 10 times bigger than you are. And you need to be able to be talking to your customers and have customer testimonials to be able to reinforce your messaging to the audience. Again, all these things we could spend multiple hours on all of them, right? But just have those in your mind, and you can do some research online. But of course, the masterclass and Kalungi also have quite a few pieces of information on these. You also really need to know your audience well, right? You need to have a very clear ideal customer profile. You need to have clear personas, and you need to have an idea of how big your market is, right? Even if you have a really tight ICP, do you know that it's going to be able to support your growth goals, right? Is it too small, right? Or if you have an ICP that's too large, right? Have you segmented it down enough to where you'll be effective? All these things are really important. And then, of course, you need to be able to measure the right results. You need to have things like objectives and key results to make sure that your quarters are successful, that you're focused on the right things. You need to be able to have a fully functioning CRM so that you can attribute the leads that you're getting to the right sources and hand them off the right way and follow up with them the right way. And then, of course, you need project management, you'll need MarTech infrastructure, and you'll need the dashboards so that you can see, live how your team is doing, if it's going in the right direction, and where you need to double down and where you need to cut. Again, super critical things to focus on, but not things that we will be focusing too much time on this presentation. But let's go into kind of, once you have those down, how to establish a go-to-market strategy. The first thing that we'd like to look at is really where you sit within your market and what that market consists of. You might recognize this curve, but this is Geoffrey Moore's crossing the chasm curve, right? And basically, this takes a market and looks at the people within it and how they view change, right? So on the left side, you'll see innovators and early adopters. On the right side, you'll see late majority and laggards. And it's really important for you to go out into your market, talk to people, and understand where they are, right, on this curve. And usually what will happen is as your product is immature, right, you will be marketing to innovators and early adopters. And as you start to mature that product, you'll go to the right on this curve. You'll notice that we also layered on a few pieces on top of this curve, right? And these are kind of how we think about marketing to the different audiences in these segments, right? Typically early on, when you're targeting innovators or early adopters, you're really focusing a lot on psychographics, right? Like, why do they care? It's less about demographics, right? We don't really care what they look like. We care what they care about and what problems they have, right? And then as they start to mature, then we'll start to we've really solidified what they care about, right? And now we can really start to segment, what do they look like? Where do they work? Things like that. Really helpful to understand your market, right? And if you are in an innovators and early adopters market, you'll be focusing very differently on marketing rather than the late majority, right, and laggards. Any thoughts from you here, Stijn?
Yeah, I think this is a great introduction of the concept of the chasm, right? That's the whole book by Geoffrey Moore is about that. But it's so difficult for most of early stage software companies to get people who are fans early on, who are usually only fans of themselves, right? That's what a lot of innovators are. They want to help you because they like to help you because you're working on something that they kind of wanted to have invented themselves. They want to help you build the product, take some credit for it, and all that is very positive. But they're going to move on. They're going to move on from you. They're going to move on from your product the moment they feel that it's not necessarily as new and as shiny anymore. And they're definitely not going to be great testimonies or case studies because they might be completely the wrong persona, in the wrong vertical, and even the wrong use case. And then the early adopters, they are not fans of themselves, but they want to keep it to themselves. They don't want to tell anyone else because they think of this as a great competitive advantage, right? They've kind of found you with your solution and they think they are kind of ahead, and they may not want to, be the ones to talk to others about it because of that. They see it as a kind of first mover advantage, and that creates the chasm. Because what's really true about the early majority is that they don't want to do it alone. They may want to go early, but they're definitely not going to go alone. So they're looking for some testimonials. They're looking for some people who've gone before them, or at least they're going to go with them. And if you don't get the early adopters to help you with a couple of quotes or a couple of testimonials, it's going to be really hard to get the early majority to get that mobilized. And that's where the chasm falls, right? Right between the early adopters and the early majority. And late majority is not really that relevant for most of the people probably on this webinar, right? If you get from product market fit to T2, D3 scaling, then of course, at some point, you're going to explore channels and personas and even industries that maybe are less, how do you call it, risk? They're more risk averse and that need like many more testimonials and proof points and credibility, etc. But we're usually not focused on that yet. But getting the early adopters, the few fans that you have that are using the solution that you have to offer for their economical benefit, for their business outcomes, getting them to talk about that publicly and to be able to be used as references, even if it's only in a very specific way, right? Maybe you can write about them in a way that's relatively opaque, maybe not mention their name, but the type of company and things like that. It is so important that you got to kind of put a lot of effort into that.
Yeah. This goes back to the customer's testimonials bullet that we had in the previous slide, but those are so critical in helping you to bridge the gap, basically, and cross that chasm. But also, right, as your product matures, the audience that you're catering to will also mature. And so it's not just a one and done thing, right? You can't just do a bunch of testimonials up front and be done with it. You really need to stay plugged in with your audience and make sure that you're on top of how their views are changing and how you can speak to them effectively. All right, next slide. So now that you know where you are on that maturity curve, right, you'll see that bell curve at the bottom of that chart. Now you can start to think about where to place yourself in this chart, which also incorporates competitive density into the equation, right? So think about both how mature your market is and then how competitive it is. And basically, if it is a highly competitive market, you turn into a market shaker. And if it's a green field or a blue ocean market, right, then you can start to think about yourself as a market maker. And each distinction has a very separate go-to-market strategy to make them successful. I know that Stijn has a lot of thoughts on this, so I'll just let him lead this one.
Yeah, it's so a lot of you, when you start a company or you start a team that's part of a fast-growing startup, your ambition is, of course, to dominate a category. That's often the reason there's a new product needed, right, or a use case that really needs solving, and that would qualify for market making. The upper left of this picture basically means you're either trying to build a new category or you're in a very young category where you feel you can have a real leading position. And that is extremely cool, right? And it's very commendable. It's also extremely hard, right? Making a market and ultimately trying to dominate that market, being one of the leaders in a category, means you have to be early and you have to be willing to invest in the education of the market, in the problem awareness, marketing that you have to do, the thought leadership. It's very expensive and it takes time. And what you find is that if it doesn't work, if the category is not catching on, if Gartner is not suddenly rushing to create a magic quadrant about the problem that you have found and that you're solving for, that you find yourself in maybe as part of a larger category that you're trying to redefine, where you're trying to either carve out a niche or you're trying to disrupt the category in some form. And that's really the market shaker part. You realize that, hey, maybe the category that I'm starting in is actually bigger, although I can maybe create a subcategory that at some point will stand on its own. That's just not where we are today. And if you find yourself in that larger category that is mature, let's say CRM, and you're building a CRM system that is so innovative for such a specific vertical that it is truly, truly unique, you're still starting in this larger category called CRM. And now you have to either take a disruption approach or a differentiation approach. And I take these terms from the Job to Be Done framework. So the credit is really there for that kind of model. And differentiation means you find a set of customers who are underserviced, who don't get exactly what they need. And especially if you're catering to a certain use case or a certain vertical, certain industry, a certain part of the world, You may have a certain regulatory requirement, you may have a certain capability, a feature, even if language or localization is part of the niche that you're catering to, that could absolutely be enough to differentiate in a way that makes that smaller group of customers really willing to pay more for your solution, to pick your solution over others, to see you as the premium option, right? And that would be a differentiation strategy that allows you to shake up that larger category and either carve out a piece that you will really own, or maybe even create a new subcategory that could be around that specific vertical or specific, type of use case. Disruption is the other side of that same coin, where you basically say there's a group of customers who are getting more than they need. They're getting a ton of complexity, a ton of features, a ton of capability that they're maybe not even able to consume. They're not even able to use it. They're certainly not willing to pay for it. And a disruption strategy would be you're either making the access to the solution easier, you're reducing the friction. Part of that could be a lower price point, but it could also be an easier way to kind of, maybe the pricing unit is different, right? And maybe the absolute number, the dollars is not different, but the way you price the price per, you go from per user to per something else that is more logical maybe to the way this part of the category wants to buy. Or you're just making it easier by focusing on the things that this smaller group of customers really need and take out all the other things that are really noise for them. And this makes onboarding cheaper. It makes their ROI probably better. All those are examples of disrupting a category. Both are basically on the lower right quadrant of this picture, because you have to realize you're in an existing category. So you don't have to educate your audience on the problem, but you do have to educate them on a new way that you're coming to market with that makes it either easier, disruption, or that makes it more valuable for them to pick your solution.
Yeah, the only other thing that I'll add to that last slide, thanks, is that being the market maker is often the sexy thing, right? That startup founders want to go do. They want to create that category. They want to be the first mover. They want to be the Netflix, say, of their category, which is great, right? And if you can do it well, the upside is all yours. But it can be very difficult to do, right? The beauty of the market shakers and the competitive market, or choosing an existing category, is that the demand is already there. You just have to tap into it the right way, right? But the problem with this market maker and being the first mover is that you have to go create the demand. People may not even be aware that there's a problem that needs to be solved, right? So it's a much longer road to get to demand. And it's definitely, if we're gonna go into forecasting and ROI in a second, it's not a scenario where you can necessarily project to have even marketing qualified leads in the first month, in the first quarter, right? Because you're going to have to go find those people, convince them that, pull them out of stasis, right? Convince them that there's a problem worth solving, and then start to bring them down the funnel instead of just tapping into a set of demand that's already there. Okay. So we understand the market, right? We understand if we're a first mover or we are a market shaker, right? Now let's think about the average deal size that we have and what go-to-market strategy that it can support. We like to think about go-to-market strategies kind of like hunting, and we stole this from a 0.9 graphic that's on go-to-market strategy. You can check that out. But basically, you can think about your go-to-market strategy as hunting, right? So you can see these graphics on the x-axis. On the right side, you'll see an elephant, right? That's big game hunting. You have to use a very specific and targeted approach to take down an elephant. Not that I condone taking down elephants, but then also if you look on the left side, you'll see those dots we call flies, right? So the tactics that you would use to generate a bunch of flies, right, are not the same tactics that you would use to pick up an elephant. And so you have to really be aware of the size of deal that you're going after and the right strategy to pick it up. And to put this more tactically, right, the nice thing about an elephant is that it has a very large deal size, which supports a very large customer acquisition cost, right? That means that I can throw sales people at it. I can have expensive dinners, right? I can have custom events. I can really put everything that I have into closing that account. Versus a fly, I just don't have the budget to do any of that, right? I might not even be able to afford ads to profitably pick up a customer. And so there is you can argue, right, that you spend on ads to generate research, right, and to increase your market, the amount of market share that you can generate, right? That's totally fair. But in terms of a profitable go-to-market strategy, it may not be the right thing. So, so we've basically tiered them into three categories, right? For low ACV deals, which I would probably say, anywhere from below $10,000. I would call it a product-led strategy. And so that is basically marketing takes the lead all the way to the product. The product has a low friction sign-on, right? And then the product converts them into a paying customer. You can go marketing and service-led, which is where marketing will go generate the leads and the interest, right? And then the sales team and service team will then bring them into close and convert them. And then sales-led is where sales is the primary driver of the sale, but marketing will support and give them air cover and give them the right thought leadership and materials to be successful or coordinate the right events, right? So very different go-to-market strategies for each level, but it's critical that you identify this early so that you don't spend a bunch of money and gain some traction in a way that is not ROI positive for you, and you're actually losing money while gaining market share. Any thoughts here, Stijn?
Yeah, what other thing is maybe helpful here, when you think of the middle box, marketing and service-led growth, the way to think about that, you're leveraging scale, but it's people resources, right? When you build a marketing capability, you invest in demand gen or demand capture, per Brian's point on the previous slide. It's going to cost a relatively high amount of go-to-market dollars, customer acquisition cost, but you're using people to do something once that may scale to get you 10, 15, 20, multiple leads, multiple new customers. The same is true for what we call customer success-led growth, and it had to fit on the slide, so that's why it says service-led growth. But it's really also using people resources, right? Customer success managers, for example, to do things like onboarding, but then incorporate referral campaigns, mechanisms that will drive more leads, more growth, because you either onboard customers really well or you get upsell, cross-sell opportunities out of the account management, the customer success that you do over the years. But all those are basically people doing things that you can scale, that you can repeat, that you can templatize, etc. Versus sales-led really implies for every new sale that you do, you have to have a customer conversation, right? So it's far less scalable. It means one person on your team has to do something for every deal you close. That's why kind of the ACV goes up, and then of course the CAC that can support that go-to-market will be larger.
Yep. And we'll see this in terms of real numbers or, well, hypothetical numbers in a second, but obviously, right, the amount of elephants you would need to hit your revenue goal will be much fewer than the amount of flies, right? So you can afford to be more custom on the sales-led versus a product-led. You're almost pushing for like a type of virality through your organic efforts, right? And ads. You really need high volumes to be able to make that strategy work.
And one last thing on that, Brian, the middle box, marketing and service-led, it also ages relatively fast. Mm-hmm. When your category matures, what happens? Clicks get more expensive. Organic search positions are going to be harder and more competitive to sustain, right? You'll have to constantly create new content, make it, refresh it. Where product-led growth and sales-led are kind of a winner-takes-all strategy, right? In the mature category, you'll find that there's a couple of players who end up owning the product-led growth kind of territory, and then a couple others who really have the best sales team. They're able to recruit the best salespeople, to retain them, to pay them the most. And so those two are kind of where in a mature category, you'll find a lot of the winners, or some will do both very well at the same time. But then the marketing-led and also customer success-led is so much easier to copy by everybody else that it becomes kind of a race to the bottom. And it doesn't mean that customer success is not super critical still, of course, to keep your retention numbers high and your churn low, but your ability to turn that into revenue growth will diminish as a category gets more mature. And the same, of course, for marketing-led growth, just because inbound and outbound will just get increasingly expensive in a mature category.
Yep. Yeah, so very good problem to have, right? That if you've reached that point, but I'll absolutely need to keep your eye on the horizon there and have a plan for either going up market to where you can take on a sales-led, or being able to capture that down market to where you can be hyper efficient and really capitalize. All right, next slide. Okay, and then finally, you need to take a look at yourself and your company and how mature you are, basically, and then how fast do you want to be rounding these bases. So if any of you have read T2D3, you'll recognize this model, but this is basically our SaaS maturity model. And the idea is that you really, in order to get to 100 million ARR, which is the goal of a lot of SaaS companies, you need to round these bases, and you can't really go out of order, right? In order to start, you have to get to a minimum viable product. You have to have something that can hit the market, right, and be used by customers and get feedback. Once you get that minimum viable product, your goal is to reach product market fit, where the market really starts to take hold of the product. You start to see the organic flywheel start to spin. People start to refer others to you, right, and pay and stay. And then once you reach that, then you can really start to scale. You can pour the gas on where what that works. You can diversify your demand generation efforts, right, and really start to see that growth. And then you can start to focus on profitability to hit that 100 million ARR target. What I will say is that this applies to companies as a whole, but it also actually applies to marketing teams as well, and marketing maturity, right? There are many companies out there who have a strong product and who may have even reached product market fit, but just haven't invested in marketing. And so while the company may be at PMF, right, the marketing team may not have gotten to first base yet. And so it's important to have both of those things in mind as you're thinking about your go-to-market strategy, and who you're actually going to bring in to execute that, right? What size team you're going to be working with, what expertise you're going to be bringing in to make sure that you execute the right way. Let's keep going. So we've taken this T2D3 model and we've broken it out a little bit more. What we've basically, I'll focus on the first three because if I focus on the T2D3 side and the 100 million ARR side, we'll never get done with this webinar. So let's focus here, and then maybe we can do a separate one on that. But let's focus on the pre-MVP stage, right? We've basically come up with some indicators, some goals, and some KPIs for each stage because they will be different, right? The size that you're at will likely be different from pre-MVP, where I would say you're probably between 1 and 1 million or 0 and 1 million ARR, to MVP. Again, can be flexible, but 1 million to 10 million ARR, and then product market fit is often 10 million to 50 million ARR. In each stage, your goal is going to be quite different as well as a marketing team, right? In pre-MVP, you're really just trying to understand the market. You're trying to establish a market hypothesis, right? And then test that. You need to start generating beta users. You need to be generating your first paid users, right? But finding people who really will just spend time with your product and give you good feedback and make sure that you can solve the right problems for them. Versus when you're at MVP, your goal is to reach product market fit, right? And so you need to start carving out a niche. You need to start identifying what your ideal customer profile is. You need to understand them so well that you can become their champion. You need to be attracting people not only who pay you, but also who stay and refer others, right? And then, of course, as you start to reach product market fit, it's really about scalability. So how can you focus on scalable and sustainable growth? How can you double down on the channels that work? How can you diversify your demand generation channels and go-to-market strategies to really start to pour gas on the fire and really start to scale? And then because your goals are different, your KPIs will also be different, right? For pre-MVP, you're looking at number of positive conversations you've had, number of beta users acquired, number of active users, right? For minimum viable product, as you're trying to get to product market fit, we've actually come up with a really nice set of 10 a checklist of 10 things to hit product market fit. And they're all 10, units each, right? So 10 unique visitors, 10 hand raisers, 10 sharers, 10 new testimonials. And if you can cross off everything on this list, and it is everything, right? Then you can call yourself at product market fit. And I'll see a lot of companies saying that they're at product market fit, but maybe only crossing off about half or 3/4 of this list. And I would say that they're not quite there yet. And then we have to have a conversation. And then, of course, product market fit, you're really looking to scale. So we actually like to look at a T2D3 formula, which we can probably share after this webinar. But all the levers that go into that, right? What are your MQLs at? What's your customer acquisition cost? What's your conversion rate down the funnel? What's your average revenue per user or per unit, right? And what's your churn? Ultimately, those will generate the pipeline that you need. And then another thing to start thinking about is that brand recognition as you're starting to really scale and start to have that volume and that large market share. The brand recognition will grease the wheels for everything else in that KPI section.
Yeah, so the other way so the formula is maybe helpful for some of you, but the other way to think about getting from product market fit to really high scale growth is that you can get to product market fit by doing one or two things really well. You can have one channel that really drives most of your funnel, where you maybe found like a certain group of customers that are just buying almost automatically. But when you need to broaden that to the numbers that a T2, D3 growth curve require, you need to diversify your demand gen. You can no longer forget about changing or optimizing the shape of your funnel. And then, of course, the speed. So the shape, the size of the funnel, the speed, all those things have to kind of start growing at the same time. And the parts of the formula that sort of talk to that are kind of part of doing that. But that's kind of the biggest challenge that I always see with customers, with companies that go from a couple million in ARR to 10, 15, 20, is that they have to start multitasking. You have to have people in your team who are comfortable optimizing for these different types of the commercial go-to-market function.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so what does this look like more tactically, right? Like thinking about yourselves and how you place yourselves in this model. We've already gone through the ARR and the goal, right? But what does it mean for a marketing budget, right? For pre-MVP, we usually think about it as spending about 0 to 12% of your ARR on a team. And what that typically looks like is a one full-time equivalent, right? And why we say equivalent instead of employee is that there's a bunch of different ways to accomplish that, right? You can hire one person. You can hire a group of fractional people, right? You can hire one or two agencies, right? There's a bunch of different ways that can be accomplished, but that's about the bandwidth that you would need. In MVP, it's usually 12 to 20% of ARR because you're starting to really push the gas and scale a little bit. We'll tend to think that that's about 3 full-time equivalents. And then once you hit product market fit, we would say you at least need 5 because that's when things really start to heat up. And as Stijn was saying, it's not only that 1 or 2 demand generation channels work. Right now, we're really starting to broaden our approach. There's tons of different priorities that need to be put in play, right? And you need at least a team of 5 to be able to do that. We've created podcasts and blogs on the pros and cons of each model that I mentioned: in-house, agency, fractional, right? So there's tons of depth we can go into there, but this at least gives you a head start, right? And thinking about where you are and where you sit, and then what team size you can think about to support those goals. Okay, so now let's get into forecasting and looking at the ROI of your marketing for your company. As Duff mentioned, there will be a template that you can use at the end of this presentation, and we'll send you a follow-up email with it as well. But wanted to at least showcase that a little bit and showcase how some of those different factors that we talked about can impact the forecasting and the ROI of that go-to-market strategy. So if you're interested, you can scan this QR code, take your phone out, and it'll take you to a read-only version of this. You can just create a copy, and then it's yours to play around with. Give you guys a few minutes or a minute or so to do that. I know I'm cutting it close on time already, so I got to keep moving.
We will also be sharing a link to this in your thank you email, and you can email us too if you have trouble getting into it.
Okay, perfect. So then let's keep going. But let's go through a couple different scenarios just so that we can A, play with the model and I can show you how it works, but B, try on some of these different levers that we've been talking about. So should I take over and share my screen, Duff?
Yes, please.
Let me do that. This guy, I believe. Hopefully it's right.
I'll stop my share so I don't be any confusion.
There we go. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay. So let's start with the basically the flies go-to-market strategy, right? Where our ACV is, maybe they're not flies, but a lower ACV, right? So our ACV is around $5,000 right now. And our goal is to get around 1.5 million in revenue in the next year. So this is a pretty simple model that we can use to play around with some assumptions and look at how they will affect this. And what I like to use this model for is when we're going into clients and really just starting to ideate on what go-to-market strategy will be the most effective and what the right investment is for that go-to-market strategy. This allows me to take kind of a top-down approach from this is the goal that I have to hit from a corporate standpoint, right? And this is what it will actually look like in terms of MQLs that I'll need to generate in order to hit that. You can go much deeper in terms of what sources you use and how the cost per lead and everything will impact that. And we have other models for that. But just for the purposes of this call, this is a very nice, quick and dirty look at how many MQLs do I need by when to hit my goal, and how much do I think that's going to cost, and what will that ROI look like? So if you look at this, the blues are all formulas, and this, I don't know if this is a peach or whatever this color is those are all entry points, right, in your assumptions. And so this is where you can start to play around. I'm assuming a customer lifetime of 2 years, and then I'm also assuming a conversion rate of MQL to opportunity of about 50%, and then opportunity to win at about 35%. Might be a little high for some industries, might be low for some, so you can tweak that. And then I'm assuming that I'll need about 2 marketing team members to be able to support this. And we just have, I think, $10,000 associated with either, right? And so you may hire somebody who's more senior and more junior, right? But it usually balances out to that. Average sales cycle, because it is a small ACV, is about 1 month. And then the current market tech spend is about $1,500, and that's usually allows us to get a CRM and maybe 1 or 2 outbound pieces of software, which will support our growth. So here's where I can start to play with MQLs, right? And I can change all these numbers, right? And if I, 150, this will update, right, all the conversion rates down the funnel and will impact the amount of revenue that I get. But basically, by doing this, right, you'll see that even if I produce 20 MQLs in the first month, I won't see a dime of that until the second month, because it takes them a month to go in, right? And so it doesn't really affect this model as much, but when we get into the higher ACVs, it absolutely will. And then I can start to think about how I'm going to be ramping up my campaign spend to be able to support these MQLs, right? And how much of this is paid versus organic, right? And you probably will need to spend more on paid earlier, right, before organic can really start to take over. What this is nice too is that this gives you a high level marketing budget that you can look at. So throughout the year, you can project that you should be spending about this much, right, in order to get things off the ground. And then you can also see what's that ROI actually going to look like, right? I shouldn't expect, even if, I start generating MQLs on month 1, which might actually be too fast, right? Especially if you need to do a lot of this strategy work. I shouldn't expect to have positive ROI right away, right? Because I need that demand to build. I need it to percolate through the sales funnel, right, before it starts to hit. But then once I see it, or once I have a couple months in play, right, then I'll start to see positive ROI, and I can see that grow over time. I'll keep moving just for the sake of time, but feel free to ask questions after the fact. So now let's move up to a $20,000 ACV, right? The rest of these conversion rates are the same, right? The marketing team members that I think I need has gone from 2 to 3. And then the average sales cycle has also increased because of this increased average contract value. And the reason behind that is usually the higher ACV clients have more friction in the funnel. It just take longer. There's more stakeholders. They do more diligence before spending their money, et cetera. So you'll see that these 10 MQLs won't hit until the second quarter, right? So you shouldn't even, again, if you start producing MQLs in the first month, you shouldn't expect any revenue to hit until the second quarter, right? And so what that does is that even even if we were to start immediately, right, I shouldn't expect positive ROI until midway through the second quarter. It's a good expectation to have as a leader, right, a company leader, but also as a marketer, right? Don't overpromise, even if you're doing everything perfectly right and pushing really hard. It can take a second to get that ROI to be positive. But of course, right, the nice thing is that once it starts to be positive, it will just continue to ramp, right? And it's still very doable to get, a 2.4 multiple ROI on this model. You just have to practice patience. Marketing in general is not a short-term initiative, right? It takes a lot of patience. It takes consistency, and that's really where you'll start to see your growth. And then quickly going to the $50,000 ACV, right? We put this in about a 6-month sales cycle with 4 marketing team members. And so that will obviously take your wins out 6 months just from the start, and will require, but the nice thing, right, is even though it pushes your wins out so much, you can see that the volume here is way, way, way lower, right, that you'll have to drive than, say, a $5,000 ACV, right? And so those are different levers that you'll need to be able to be aware of, and the pros and cons of each. Anyways, feel free to make a copy of this, play around with it according to, what factors make the most sense of your business or for your business. And hopefully it can lead to some good discussions with your leadership team around the assumptions that you're using, right? And what happens if we increase this conversion rate, right? And what happens if we spend the extra $30,000 on ad spend, right? What will that give us, right? It gives you a very nice playground to start applying some of the assumptions that you're using in your go-to-market strategy to paper and start to see the outcomes as you, so that you're not flying completely blind if you're implementing this for the first time.
Fantastic. Let me share my screen back here, and we will continue. All right. Well, definitely everyone, please consider for yourself how this forecast template can be used to illustrate your own situation at your own SaaS company this week. Here is the link again. And we are going to send out this link again in your email. So if you don't have your phone handy, not to worry. I think you'll have a lot of fun playing with this template. I certainly have had a lot of fun experimenting with it. So please do spend some time with that. Kalungi's also set aside some time with Brian for a deep dive with One Lucky Company. So just this could be about your growth strategy or any aspect of your marketing. He'll just focus on what matters to you. So we're going to be putting out a random lucky winner from the attendees on this call when we send out the replay in about a week. Lastly, please take advantage of this promo code for the T2D3 CMO Masterclass. There's more details about it at t2d3.pro. And we'll tell you about it again in the thank you email. But the quick process is you're going to sign up for a little free account, enjoy what's in there. If you decide you want to sign up for the masterclass, you can use this code at checkout. And again, we'll send that in the thank you mail. So with that, I'd like to get some questions in here quickly because we have 10 minutes and get a little more advice for you. So let's move into your questions answered. And let's see, I'm just going to take these questions starting from most recent first here. This could be either for Stijn or for Brian. Would you consider BDRs to be part of the marketing team full-time equivalent that you're talking about here? Is that would be a separate allocation of resources?
Yeah, good question. I'll give a quick one, but I know Stijn has thoughts on this as well. I've seen it done both ways where BDRs are underneath sales or marketing. I typically like to run them under marketing just because, especially if marketing is running some sort of account-based marketing initiative, right? Just structurally, I like to have one throat to choke or hand to high five, right, for each initiative, and putting BDRs under marketing for an account-based marketing strategy just makes the most sense. It shows, or it makes it so that all people are rowing in the right direction, right? And all strategies are aligned and they can be the most effective that way. If you're starting to use BDRs for more of an inbound motion, right, then I could go either way. They can be a nice qualifier for deals as they're coming in or leads as they're coming in before it hits AEs, right? And there is something to be said for keeping them close to marketing as they're making those qualifications. But there's obviously a strong a strong argument to have them under sales as well, because what they're doing is selling, right? So, but I don't know if you have any thoughts, Stijn.
Yeah, I do. I think the most popular blog article actually on the Kalungi website has been for years, the SDR versus BDR article. And it's partly because, let's start with the definition, right? There's no real definition of SDR, BDR, or 5 different acronyms that talk about people who do work early in the funnel. And so the way I'm going to answer or give my thoughts on the question is more about, is someone helping with demand capture or with demand generation? And if it's demand capture, so often that's an inbound, like a SDR type role, speed is everything, right? So they're having it fall under marketing, make sure that your early stages of the funnel move fast, because when people are shopping around, it's not so much of the type of information they're getting, it's more who is responding first. And once you get that first call, you may not even take the other one, right? So speed is so critical there that I would say in the demand sort of capture scenario, having them under marketing is a good reason. Doesn't mean that it can't go fast under sales too, but that's kind of what I would look for, speed. And then if it's more demand generation, so account-based marketing, building out sort of your capability to knock on doors, to drive sort of really targeted outreach through whatever channel you deem relevant. You need to learn from every call, every interaction, right? If you do outbound, if you do demand gen, it's not so much about getting a lot of conversions. It's either you get a conversion or you get you learn something. You learn that the pitch didn't work, or the content wasn't appropriate, or the target persona or the vertical that you're going after is not the right one, right? So that's another reason to, if you want to take control as the marketing leader, it's partly because you want to maximize the learning, especially early in the development of an ABM or an outbound program. You're going to hit a lot of closed doors, and you want to make sure that feedback loop of which doors are closed and why is extremely tight. And the marketing leader is probably more incented to do the learning and less about, just knocking on as many doors as possible. So that would be, for those 2 scenarios, demand gen and demand capture, I would say if you're the marketing leader, you want to pitch that it should be controlled by you, these would be the 2 reasons. But then again, if there's another team, a sales team that's very good at optimizing for these things, then it might be fine to have it there as well. You're muted, Dev, I think.
Sorry, I'm on mute. I do have another question here. It's a big topic, but one would be interesting just to kind of quickly go through the pros and cons of what the major kind of marketing channels might be for B2B SaaS when you're trying to, when you're at the PMF level and looking for that scale. What would be the relative pros and cons of those major categories?
I'll go first. But again, I'm sure Stijn has a great answer as well. It's a tough one to answer very specifically, so I'll try and be general about it. I guess why it's tough specifically is because the channels that are effective across each industry are very different, right? You basically think about marketing as you need to reach people where they hang out and where they do their research, right? And that changes depending on the maturity of the market that you're going into in terms of, right, what publications they read. There's so many different variables that alter what those channels are. But that being said, we typically like to start out with a mix of organic and paid strategies, right? So becoming a thought leader and either posting those takes on Google and or organic social, right? Again, where your prospects hang out is really critical. We like to use paid to get some quick wins and to usually accelerate our go-to-market approach. But paid is pretty broad, right? It could be Google ads, it could be Meta ads, it could be LinkedIn, it could be utilizing Gartner and G2 Crowd, right? It could be using pay-per-lead, it could be going after publications, right? There's tons of different applications. And we usually like to start with some of the more major ones first, but then really like to diversify into some of those more fringe ones as we get going, again, to make sure that we have the most diverse approach possible, but also can stabilize our demand generation. And then, of course, there are referral channels and partner channels that you can use as you start to scale. And if you get those set up the right way, they can be huge pipeline boosters for you. But again, very industry and maturity dependent.
Yeah, my answer would be, I would, just like you want to nail a niche, you almost want to nail a channel niche as well. You want to find that channel that's not necessarily the largest channel, but the channel where you can really stand out, right? And let's take the most obvious one, right? Organic search. If you have a value proposition and you kind of in tune with what your audience is looking for, you have an ideal customer profile, you kind of understand the personas that you're trying to service. Now just go test the channel, right? Go type in those Google search queries and see how the other parties that you're competing with, because in Google search and paid search and all other channels as well, the only thing you need to do is outrun the other guys, right? Or gals. You don't necessarily have to be the best amongst all those channels, but for the channel you pick, you need to make sure that you can make it into the top 2, top 3 of whatever the way the choices show up there are, right? So in an organic search scenario, it would be the top search results. So you type in that search query, you look at what else is popping up, and if you feel that you can do a better job coming up with a better answer with better quality content than the other 2, 3, top positions, then that's a great channel to go after. And you kind of do the same for every type of channel that you're considering. And you're not necessarily looking at the size of the channel, the amount of search volume, for example, but you're first kind of picking the ones where you feel you can really stand out. And it may mean that you pick some channels that are relatively small, but owning those is a great start to become relevant and to learn and then to become credible and then go after some of those larger volume channels.
Yeah, I really like that answer. I think especially depending on where you are in that base path, right? Going from minimum viable product to product market fit to scaling. I think if you're pre-MVP or MVP, your job is to test what channels you can start to get some traction on, right? And then as Stijn is saying, if you can find those channels, then it's really all about getting to product market fit is all about owning, right? Owning 1 or 2 that you can do really, really well. And then it actually, as you start to scale past that, then you start to diversify again and test. So it's always marketing, the way that we like to run it is always a cycle between testing and diversifying to solidifying and optimizing to testing and diversifying. It's kind of an ebb and flow approach.
All right. I think I will pause it there just to be respectful of people's time. I do see there's a few other questions here that we haven't answered about sales and sustainability, a few other things. I think it'll be interesting. So we will be writing back to you on those things, we promise. Any of the questions that occurred to you, just please feel free to reply back to our thank you email today. But first I want to thank Brian and I want to thank Stijn today for your comments and your ideas. If you missed our links today, no problem. We will be sending that thank you email, and we invite you to take a look at kalungi.com and t2d3.pro to learn more about growing your software company. There's also the T2D3 book, which you can see here behind me, and the T2D3 CMO Masterclass to explore. And otherwise, thank you for your time today, and enjoy yourself out there in the summer of SaaS. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.